Welcome back to the channel. As you can see, I am not in the back of the F100 this week, and that is because it is loaded with parts and we are going to go over them in a few minutes. But first, I've done some things this week which I unfortunately didn't record, so we're going to quickly go over them now. The first is the electrics. So when I said that the power into the cab was going to stay the same, I had a deep think about it and realized that the power cable from the battery into the cab to the fuse box, I couldn't work out the size of it. And because, like I said before, I want to make sure that we can add things to this in the future, I wanted to make sure that we had headroom for extra capacity. So the problem with that is the cable was obviously all wrapped up inside in a loom inside the engine bay. It was a bit of a pain to get out, but we did do that. And as we can see now, we have a collection of cables coming out of the engine bay, which I need to reroute. So I've ordered a new one. This is the old battery cable. I've ordered a new one, which we will go and have a look at in a minute, and then we can get that replaced. As well as the battery and the electrics, I've also made a start on taking out some of the original components. So you can see on the floor, we've got the lights and the indicator from the right side of the car, but it's exactly the same on the other side. This here is just the original wiring, which I'm going to replace. But I just need to get under the fender to get it out. The good news is I'm going to get these on the bench well, shortly, and we'll test just to make sure that all the connections and connectors are working. And then if you come in here a little bit, you can't see, it's just a rusty patch at the moment, but in here is where the original horn was. And I've taken that out. It's actually on the bench, and we're going to see if that actually still works, because this car could actually make a sound that it's not made for an awful long time. Right, so as I mentioned, all the parts now, well, majority of the parts have arrived from the US. So let's just grab a box and see what's going on. I'm going to jump up here and see what we've got. Right, we'll do the simple ones first. So the first is when I got the car, the engine had no dipstick, which is fine, I think, for majority of uses, but I just wanted that confidence to be able to check that the oil wasn't burning out or not lost any oil. The Mustang in particular weeps a little bit in places, so again, it's just making sure that we're keeping on top of the basics for maintenance. So I did speak to Brian at Roadcraft UK. I'll pop a link to these guys at the bottom. They're really helpful, and we do have a new dipstick. At the moment, the place for the dipstick is actually plugged, so I need to unplug that, which is a challenge in itself to figure out, and then this should just replace straight in. So that's just another job to add to the list. What else have we got? Okay, next up we've got some parts from carburetor.com. Again, really helpful. Sent them an email, listed out what I needed, and they sorted me right out. This is mainly just reams of cabling, which is for the project next week. So we've got 3 grades of cable. We've got the cable for the battery feed into the cab. We've got the switch cable, and then we've got the main circuit cable for the headlights, fuel pump, etc. Then these next few boxes were all from Summit Racing, which again is a US company. Again, super helpful. Sent them an email of what I needed, the year model of the car, and they sent me back all the parts and the relevant parts that would fit. So in here we have new choke cable, which again I mentioned in the previous video, is just to make sure that we can get the start up a bit easier. It's a bit of a convoluted process at the moment. That's just a sort of improvement of life. We've also got, which I don't know if anyone's noticed, but we've got a new passenger mirror. Because I'm not going to take that off yet, but there's a passenger mirror there, which we will fit in the next couple of weeks. It's a little bit shinier than the opposite one, but we can probably do something to make it match up to what's currently there. We've also got some dust covers for the brakes, or the new brakes that will be going in, which I'll show you in a second. They will just help keep away the dirt and grime from the brake calipers. Then we've got 2 very heavy boxes, again from Summit Racing. And I'm going to try and lift these out now. And these are the new disc brakes and calipers. And we've got a pair for each side for the front. Again, these are pretty meaty compared to the previous drum brakes that are on there. Now, this is the part we're actually having some problem with at the moment. So I've spoke to Summit. We are missing the hoses for the for the brake calipers. They promised they'll send them out. I am still waiting, but Summit don't let me down. It's probably worth mentioning as well that on this kit basically should just bolt on. So we just need to pull the kingpin out of the existing setup, and these should just slot in with a new kingpin. That's the theory anyway. But as you can see, already set up, hook in the new brake lines, and we should be good to go. So this is the complete setup, which will upgrade the single pot master cylinder to a dual one, which is much safer. We've also got the booster, which will bring in power brakes, which again will just help this big, heavy, powerful truck stop. And there's also a brake balancer on here as well, so I can run this with the discs on the back, sorry, the drums on the back and the discs on the front. And then if I ever upgrade the rears to discs, this will also cater for that as well. And I'm going to show you where this goes in a second and some of the work that we're going to need to do to this. Okay, and the final piece of the larger puzzle, I mentioned about power steering. So when I pulled this truck up the drive, I have to do quite a tight 3-point turn to get it in the garage. And that was much to my wife's amusement as I sort of tried to turn this big heavy truck. So I've got a electric power steering kit from EPAS Performance. And again, I'll put a link down to them below. Again, just like the other companies, mega helpful. Told them about the vehicle, sent them some pictures, and they've sent me the correct kit, as well as followed up with some installation instructions. So I did originally believe that this sat under the dash, but this one in particular is going to actually sit in the engine bay, so it should keep the dash a bit tidier. But all this does, from memory, I think it's a 60 amp motor that just adds extra turning force as I turn the wheel. And it's all electrically powered, so there's no kind of hydraulic hoses, etc. that a typical power steering would have. So looking forward to installing that. And that's one of the jobs that we're going to start today, because we need to extract the steering column to get a better picture of how all this connects together. Okay, so I've mentioned this before, but I'll just recover again. So at the moment, we only have a single pot cylinder a single pot master cylinder for the brake. So that's this object here, and that stores all of the hydraulic fluid. So as you push the brake from the rear, it applies pressure to that hydraulic fluid, and then it filters down this line, and that distributes them between the front and the rear brakes. Now what we're going to do with this kit, will sit pretty much in that spot there, just further back. And as you can see on this one, we've got a dual pot here, so it's very similar to there, but each one of these has a line that comes out of it. One goes to the front brakes and one goes to the rear brakes. All that means is that if we ever blow a brake line, that we can still stop the truck, which is obviously really important. It's just a nice added safety feature. And also on the back of this, we've got a booster. Now this takes a vacuum from the engine and assists. So when I push the brake, we get extra braking force. So again, just really helps stop this big heavy truck. Now, one of the things that I'm going to have to do with this, which I need to investigate a bit more, is, as I mentioned, there's only one line coming out of the brake cylinder at the moment. We need to make that two. So we need to find out where the rear brakes and the front brakes join, which is most likely just down there underneath the steering box. And we'll have to separate that line out so that there's two lines that come up. But we're going to do a map for that when we get to the brakes. Nice. Can you see the resemblance? Right, as I mentioned, this is the original, or I'm guessing the original, I mean, it's pretty much the same colour and it looks old enough, horn from the front of the car that I took off, or front of the truck that I took off. Now, it is pretty corroded on the rear, so you can see here, we've got the battery in, and then the negative on this side. So and you can see also, I think this truck has got a history of being around the cement or some kind of very dusty area, because you'll also note, just like in there, when I took these lights off, it's caked in what really looks like cement dust. So I imagine its previous life, it was not just hauling potatoes, it was probably used in some kind of building or construction work. But I want to see if this horn will actually turn on and we can make a sound from it, because there is no cables hooked up to this. So I highly doubt this has actually been heard for a very, very long time. So do something just to clean the terminals off. Right, so just got a bit of wire wool. I'm just gonna try and just get rid of the paint and dirt that's floating around on there. Cool. Then we've got the bench tester set up, again, just to replicate the battery. So we've got negative. We'll just give that a little scratch in again, just to get through that corrosion and paint. And then here, once it clips on, there we go. Bench tester on. Suspect just not grounding. I really hope this works. It doesn't look like it's going to work.
Have you turned it off and turned it back on again?
Nice cameraman feedback. Or camera woman. Let me try. It wants to work. Is that kind of working? So I think whatever's inside is not quite, it could just be jammed up with junk, but let's just try. It could be as well that the bench tester's just not shifting enough power through it. But yeah, so I think it does work, and maybe that's a sound we've not heard for a while, but I think I just need to clean up all these terminals and maybe hook it up to the actual battery, because I don't think this is pumping out enough enough power to sort of spin it up. But there we go. So I'll try and restore that. We'll probably take all these bolts out. I mean, you can see where it's been painted over, and it's just filled everything in. So we'll take all these out and maybe just give it a little service and clean up before we put it back on the truck. But that's just another circuit now that we need to add. Yeah, I think there must be a terminal connection inside that's loose, because we're getting something, but not everything. That's just another job for another day. It's also worth mentioning, off the original loom that when we pulled it out last week, we found this switch. And I wasn't completely sure what it was, but Simon messaged in and said that it was a headlight for your foot, like a foot toggle, dipped headlight switch, which I looked online and it completely and absolutely is. So apparently quite common in that era of car as well. Right, so final bit that I wanted to test over here was the lights. Just that these connectors are all working, so we need to replace them. These cables will need to be replaced because the plastic surrounding them is really brittle, so you can almost snap it. And this one has happened here, so we will need to look to replace this, but we'll just check that everything is actually still in play. Voila. So that is the indicator. So it has an orange filament that sits, or orange filter that sits on top, which is good. We've got 2 of them on the front. There's no orange ones on the rear. We're going to actually use the American style red lights for the indicators as well. Turn that off. And then here we've got the headlight. Now I think these have actually been replaced. They look like LEDs inside. I could crack this open, but there's an LED bulb in there rather than the standard filament ones. So I think this should be good. We'll do the dipped ones first, or the... Voila, that's the side lights or beams. And there's full beams as well, so super bright, which you can definitely tell they're LEDs. Compare that to the last one. So there's a and again, look at this, they've got this dust everywhere. So there's a case of whether we take the LED style that's in here and put that into the indicators and the other lights. It would make sense since we're here, and these are much more efficient and draw less amps, as far as I'm led to believe. Right, so today's task, as we're actually restoring this and not just looking at shiny new parts, come with me. We need to replace, well, we need to take out, before we replace bits, we are going to take out the steering column. So if we have a look down here, this is the steering column here, and this feeds straight into the dash, which will, sorry, into the cab, which we'll go and look at in a second. And then this is the steering box, and there's a rag joint that connects it here. And all the rag joint does, it sort of takes away some of the vibration as the wheels are sort of on the road. This rubber joint just sort of takes away some of the vibration, so you don't get sort of the feeling in the steering wheel. So we need to extract everything from the rag joint upwards. And yeah, come and have a look in the cab. So I've already mentioned I've taken the steering wheel off already, which was a process in itself. But what we've also done, I've unhooked these 2 bolts here, which hold the steering column in place, and there is a sleeve on the steering column. So when we take all this off, we'll take the sleeve off, we'll get all the cabling out, we'll be able to see where all the cables go and just get a better picture. Now, the reason we're doing this is for the power steering. So the power steering motor is going to sit where we've just looked at in the engine bay, and it's going to then connect to the original steering column back through to here. So what will happen if we don't cut anything is the steering column is probably going to move about 4 inches to about here. So unless I want to drive up here, I'm going to need to cut the steering column as well. So we've got quite a lot of bits and moving parts to sort on this one. The guide time on the install for the power steering is about 10 hours. So this could be quite a process, but we're going to get started today. Okay, so that is now free of the steering box, which is good. Now, the next bit I need to figure out is how to remove that, because that isn't going to go through there. I could take... Oh, so we could just take it off. Okay, cool. So we'll have to probably take the rag joint off, and then hopefully it should slide through. So the bit I've just put back on, we now need to take off again. Easy work. I think on reflection as well, I probably shouldn't have loosened the internals because it's probably just dangling a bit inside now, which is fine. Okay, so what I've done, we're all unhooked from that side now, but inside here, so originally I'd taken these two bolts out from the steering column shaft, which was just holding it in place. But obviously what that meant is now we're pivoting in the middle, so it's kind of, I think you're supposed to leave these in and take these out last. What I've also done is, if you can look down here, you can see that I've exposed, I pulled back the insulation, and you can see that there's a plate there with 4 bolts. I'm going to take them 4 bolts out now, and I'm hoping if I take them out, I'll be able to slide the whole column backwards, unhook these again, and we should be out. That's the theory. Let's give it a go. Look at that. One. We'll get this on the bench and have a look. I'm guessing I can get a new gasket here as well, which you see, but let's get this on the bench and have a look. But we have extracted the steering column. That is awesome. Now, whatever fell out of the steering column, not awesome. Okay, so steering column came out a little bit easier than expected, I think, in the end, which is good. But the bit that fell out, by the way, was just the spring top steering wheel, so that is back on, so we're all good. We didn't lose anything valuable. This is something that I'm going to, once we get this collar off, which is the next task, we can sort of start to see all the electrics for the turn signal, etc. Because I think that is, again, I've mentioned before, this is something that I want to retain and use in the new setup. At the other end, I'm going to have to just move that spring somewhere else. This is the bit that sits on the firewall here, and then the steering column itself pops through here and then connects to the rag joint, which is good. I think I'll be able to get hold of a new piece of rubber here for the for that, and there's just a metal plate on that side. So that is all super tidy and good, very good. So what we need to do now is see how all of this is pushed together, because that looks very, very welded. Okay, so I am going to have to figure out, it's not immediately obvious, how to take the sleeve off, which should then expose the steering column itself, as in the centerpiece. And then what I need to do is then figure out how all of this connects. So the theory basically is that this here, let's move that over. This here's engine side. This sits in here and provides the extra power that goes one of these sides. I just need to check the side that goes off to the engine bay and the side that goes up to the steering. And then we just, like I say, that'll push the whole thing forward. So then we just need to cut this down so that it fits. That's the theory. But it's not immediately obvious at the moment, given the connectors that I've got. So I do need to do some research.
A few moments later.
Okay, so I did a little bit of research, and I have contacted the power steering company as well, and we'll talk about that in a second. But what I did first was pulled there's just 3 bolts off actually 5 bolts, 3 screws and two bolts up here that hold all of this together. And then once I'd got this out of the way, there was just a bushing, I suppose, on the end of the steering column, and that meant we could slide the whole steering column out. So we now have the steering column, which is good. What isn't so good is the power steering. So I'm just going to move all this out of the way. Okay, so I've just zoomed in on the power steering pump. So this is the power steering pump that sits under the dash. Now what we have initially, so the steering box comes in here, and then this attaches to the box. Obviously that'll sit flush. I just need to loosen the nuts off. And then this side here connects to, or should connect to, the steering column. Now at the moment, the steering column that we have, if I just pull this in, and that focuses in, the steering column that we have here, you can see this is fitted. So this attaches to the rag joint, and then the rag joint attaches to the steering box. But you can see this is solid. Now I think from what I've seen online, there are some splines behind here, and it's fairly fixed. It's designed to be there. But that doesn't help us anyway, because this part of the power steering, dropping stuff, you will see in here has you can see it's almost got the square edges there basically. And our steering column, and as you can see, the steering column is a round piece, so we can see the end here. Then you can see them splines just peeking through, but either way, it's a round piece. So I have just spoken to Jeff at EPAS, who provided the kit, and he said basically what I'm going to have to do is get a machine company or a machine shop to machine the end of this steering column to fit into this adapter. And while we're at it as well, if you imagine, previously this ran all the way, just obviously the rag joint, so a slight an extra ½ inch or so, ran all the way to the steering box, and then that went up to where the steering wheel is. So that was the length that we had. We are now, when I pick up the bits we've dropped, we are now going to stick this part between the steering box and the actual column. So we need to cut the column broadly around here. So we're going to have to not only get this machined in terms of the shape, but we're also going to have to cut it down as well. And that'll give us a little bit of, we can sort of work the measurements out on that to see how far we want that steering wheel to be. So unfortunately, not a super straightforward job, but one that I think will add value to the truck in terms of everyday use. And I'm just thinking as well, while I'm looking, we will need to do the same thing if we want to retain the column. This will also need cutting in the same spot. Now, when I was having a look at this, I did notice that there is they actually look pretty new. It popped out, cool. So there's a bushing and a bearing that sits on either side. Again, I'll get this up close so you can see. So you can see the outer bushing, and then there's a bearing inside basically, which just allows things to travel freely. It's not, you can see there, it's not running brilliantly, so I may grab some replacements. We might as well do this properly while we're in here, but then that sits inside here. Now what's going to be interesting about this is if we cut this if we cut the column, we're going to lose the lip. On reflection, maybe we don't actually need to cut the column, because the column only extends as far as the firewall. So in theory, actually, this should all fit. These are the problems that we need to work out. We need to take some measurements effectively and see where we're at. But summary is not as straightforward as I'd hoped. I was hoping this would be plug and play. But I think that's going to be a running theme on this truck. So I'm now going to find a machine shop in the northwest of England. So if anyone has any recommendations, particularly in the Manchester area, that would be awesome. Please drop me a message or stick them in the comments below. I've just done a little mock-up with the new power steering in place to see how all this fits together. We've also got a steering box here. We've got the coupler here connecting So we only got the coupler connecting to the actual electric motor, and then the rest of the output from that goes up into the firewall, and there's a bracket that sits here that should fit in nicely. Then obviously all of this extra space that we pushed the steering column backwards, that is what we're going to need to cut down. So there's going to be a little bit of measuring to do and a little bit of chopping and changing. But the good thing is we can adjust where we want that steering wheel as well. So if we went a bit closer, because it was quite high up and didn't leave you a whole lot of space. So that is something that I need to look into and see if we've got any other options before we go see the machine shop. So I have just done done a couple of hours of research, just checking if there is any alternative to the options that we've laid out in terms of getting this machined and cut. It doesn't look like there is. So the job this week is to find a machine shop, get this cut, get it machined, obviously get it measured be first. So that's it for this week. Guys, thank you for watching the video. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll be back next week with more renovations on the F100.